Almost every founder I talk to, they see the failure of the company as their personal failure.
Being the CEO of your own company where it's failing and keeping you up all night long is not something that's most exciting in the world.
You learn so much more from when you fail or make mistakes than when things go well. Focus on the things that move the needle. If it doesn't move the needle, it doesn't matter.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. Most people talk about building businesses, but very few people talk honestly about why founders make the decisions they make, especially when the stakes are high and the data is imperfect and the pressure is real. Today's guest has lived both sides of the startup arc, from founding and scaling a consumer fintech business to millions of users, to selling it and kind of not to the way, getting it to the place you really wanted, and now building a company designed to help startup founders shut down with dignity. Dori Yona is the co-founder and CEO of SimpleClosure, a company born from the hard truth in tech. Shutting down sucks. I've been there. And most founders are wildly unprepared for it. Before SimpleClosure, Dori co-founded Earny, a fintech and e-commerce startup that helped over 3.5 million users save tens of millions of dollars through automatic price protection and cashback. And early in your career, co-founded a company, HashSnap, giving you a full spectrum view of many different things from inception to shutdown. So we're going to talk through the life cycle of companies, why founders start, how they scale, how they fail, most importantly, and maybe some of the psychology behind it as well, and what it looks like after the hype is gone and your company is no more. Dori, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course, thank you for having me. I feel like you know everything about my life. Well, more about me than I know about myself.
You know, AI is helpful for some of that, but it's still good to hear the real behind things. The first question I kick off with everybody is a discussion about, like, how do you define entrepreneurial excellence? And you probably, more so than many of my guests, have a really unique perspective because you've seen so many companies fail, or they're on their essentially failing path and they're shutting down. So what does excellence look like for the companies that make it that maybe you don't see? Maybe using lessons you've learned from the ones who have failed to the ones who you never see. But what makes the difference?
Yeah, very loaded question. Let me try to dissect that maybe a bit, but or maybe keep it high level at first, and then happy to like double click on what you think makes most sense.
Absolutely.
But I think the combination of the words they used, entrepreneurial excellence, they kind of contradict to some extent, because like entrepreneurs are about being scrappy and about like failing in order to learn, and and then excellence in a lot of people's minds, like, oh, you have to be perfect, you have to be excellent, like that's what excellence means. So I actually think that when I think about the combination of those two words, entrepreneurial excellence, I actually think that the entrepreneurship takes a higher larger weight there. And so from my perspective, like, entrepreneurial excellence is about tenacity, is about never giving up, is about failing, because if you don't try, you don't fail. I actually don't think like entrepreneurial excellence is necessarily succeeding or selling your business or raising around. The excellence of being an entrepreneur is like never giving up, continuing to try, continuing to iterate, not being afraid to take risks, not being afraid to fail. I think that ultimately is like entrepreneurial excellence, and yeah, that's I guess my.
No, it's actually a really good take. I mean, and I think that's very true, right? An excellent entrepreneur is the one who can essentially pick themselves back up and go at it again, or at least do something again, and not sort of let their failed company destroy their ability to continue to grow. Because my assumption is, for the large majority of founders, not all of them, of course, but like the most world famous ones we know about, have lots of failure in their past. In fact,
Almost every company that you'll read that the founder like succeeded, sold, exited, like they're typically second, third, fourth time founders. Very rare is it that it's like, a first time founder. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg's a great example of the first time, but take almost every other entrepreneur, like, CEO of OpenAI, CEO of Carta, Henry, like every one of them has a war story of trying multiple businesses before and failing.
yeah. Talk us through, like, on the note of failing, like what happened at Earny? Like, it maybe wasn't the exit you expected. You still exited it, but you're probably thinking it's going to be a $1 billion company. What happened to teach you these lessons and lead you to starting SimpleClosure?
Yeah, great question. So, Earny was a consumer fintech company, started in, what was it, 2016-ish. We started the company. We grew to 3.5 million users. Was a roller coaster. We had a lot of success. We had a lot of failures in that process. We disrupted the credit card price protection market. At the time when we started the company, almost every merchant and every credit card company had something called price protection. So it was Chase and Citi and Discover and Amex and Amazon, and the retailers and the merchants had it. And with our success, also came a lot of failure and learnings. And actually, at a certain point in time, things weren't going so well. And it was actually in a board meeting presenting financials to the board. And one of our board members looks at the numbers and the financials and says, hey, Dori, the numbers don't look so good. Runway is looking really short. We're not going to invest any further in the business. And we think that you can't go out really and raise an external round. You don't have enough traction. So we'd like to talk about plan B. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What plan B? And they said, we think we need to, discuss the option of potentially shutting down the business and understanding what that means. I'm like, okay, what is there to talk about? And so the board actually asked me to put together a shutdown analysis for the business. And I'm like, what is a shutdown analysis? And they're like, well, we'd like to better understand the timeline, the costs, are there liabilities? Do we owe severance packages? Do we have an office lease we can't get out of? Are there contracts that we can break? And so they started flooding me with a ton of questions. And the honest truth is I didn't have an answer to any of those questions. And so I told the board, hey, let me go do some homework. Let me get back to you with answers. I went home that evening from the board meeting. First thing I did is I literally went to Google and I Googled how do you
Of course.
how do you shut down a startup? Hoping to find like a platform or a company or like material information. The closest thing I could find was a blog post from some boutique law firm that was probably like 20 years old, nothing I could rely on. So that wasn't helpful. The next thing I did naturally was actually went to my LinkedIn and I'm like, okay, I'm not the first founder shutting down. Like, let's go talk to founders in my network that have shut down and ask them, like, how do you put together a shutdown analysis and what does this look like? And so I actually started going through my LinkedIn and looking for founders that have shut down their company. After spending a good 2 hours like going through LinkedIn, I couldn't find anyone. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And what I realized really quickly is that it's not that founders in my network have not shut down. It's just no one likes to write about it on LinkedIn.
Of course. No one admitting, even though everyone knows that you fail as a founder, right? I'm a four-time founder. Everyone knows that you've probably failed. People don't like to talk about it. There was a period of time where I feel like people were writing their sort of founder
Never
obituary
ended.
stories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I read a bunch of those. I feel like I put some stuff out there publicly about my own failures, but not a lot because it's hard to talk about that.
Yeah, it's hard, and I actually think we're getting a lot better as like an ecosystem in the startup world to write about and talk about it. Like if you go on LinkedIn and look at it, like you'll see there are material amount of posts now of people telling kind of their war stories and sharing their to your point obituaries. I don't think that was the case like 5 years ago. Like it was it's like a taboo topic. People are ashamed. They don't want to talk about it. Investors don't want to talk about it. Founders don't want to talk about it. I think we actually got better there.
Have you heard of FailCon?
Is that the store that
No,
sells
it
no,
was a conference called
okay,
FailCon,
okay.
and it was all about failures. It literally was like a failure conference. So
Really?
like year was in San Francisco. Travis Kalanick was the featured speaker. This was right at the beginning of like Uber was getting big, but not like it wasn't so big. Featured speaker, he talked about all his failures, but it was a full on conference about like failure. I don't know. You guys should like restart that conference. It was like really cool.
And you haven't seen it since then? I haven't
No,
actually not heard of it.
I haven't seen of it since then. Maybe it happened to 2 or 3 more years after that, but it clearly was
Yeah.
set down. You should definitely check it out, or maybe you guys help go start it.
We revived that conference. So it's actually interesting. Like it reminds me. I actually think like it is such a good idea. Again, I don't know what the agenda of the conference or who the speakers or what we're talking about, but I assume it has to do with like failure and failure stories and lessons learned. And I have to assume. And I actually want to say that like uh, I'm a very big believer like around learning from failures. And I really think that you learn so much more from when you fail or make mistakes than when things go well. And it actually like there's a lot of methodology and like in how they teach military and military combat in general in the army
And
where
you were in the military, right?
yes, I was for 7 years, and, one of the, like, so obviously there's a lot of, like, studies and learnings and, art of war and just, like, understanding the curriculum, but one of the main things that they taught in the military, it was, like, almost like the Bible in the military, it was a book called Past Failures or, like, failure events, and you would study those events, like military failures, but you would learn so much. Like that was where you got like the most amount of information and examples is actually learning from like the war stories when like when you lost a certain battle or when you made a mistake and, unfortunately injured your own soldier and like, or friendly fires, like that's where you actually learn the most. And so, I actually am a very big believer in like learning from failure. So again, I'll look into the conference. I don't know what it was about, but like, I definitely think there's value there.
What do you think? So speaking of learning from failure, how did the best founders learn from failure? Like what do the best founders do to learn from failure and gain information from it so they can do better next time? Like, is there recommendations that you give people? So obviously, you guys help people shut down, but let's talk about like the psychological aspect. How do you help people learn from it and then maybe restart and get into something new again?
Yeah. I think that the what you were talking about earlier, the memorandum or the obituary of like of a founder is like a very, very, very important process that founders, typically go through. And we see a lot of founders on our platform like go through that process. It is, by the way, something very hard to do when you're like in the thick of things and you're like dissolving and shutting down and dealing with all of it because there's so much emotion involved and there's so much like negative energy and bureaucratic and things that you're going through your head and like how do I talk to my investors and how do I share about this publicly? So it's like it's one of those things that in terms of like what I typically see a lot of the founders that really analyze their failure in order to become better. It's like they take a month off or like they dissolve kind of or use simple closure for that and then they clear their head for a month and then they sit down and write like a really thoughtful thing of a post or message or memorandum of like what went well, what didn't go well, what would they do different. By the way, I very much resonate because like I think if you asked me in my previous companies, HashSnap or Earny or any one of those previous companies, you asked me like at the moment of time when we were deciding to shut down, like, why did you fail? I'll give you 100 reasons that are not the real reason of why we failed. And I think it's like, ask me today why we failed for those companies. The answer is materially different from what the answer would have been like the day we were failing. And so I actually think like the best way to learn is to take that period of time to cool off. It could be a week, it could be a month. Everyone, decompresses differently. It could be a year to like decompress and then sit down with yourself. And I think that the honest truth is like that you have the best answer. Like as the founder, as the entrepreneur, the answer is actually in you. It is sometimes a painful answer because it could be like, I wasn't a good co-founder, or I didn't move fast enough, or I didn't see the writing on the wall, or I was stubborn to go in a certain direction and didn't pivot fast enough, or like, I wasn't like, so sometimes the reasons are brutal because it's a lot of self-reflection and a lot of like criticizing yourself. But I actually think that those are the best lessons. And that's what I typically see where like founders get the most out of kind of retroing their period. And again, it's hard to retro years of blood, sweat, and tears into a post or to a bullets, but I think it's a really important exercise.
So you sort of tee this up a little bit. What would have been your answer for why Ernie failed right when it happened, when you had that board conversation? And what's the answer that you would give today?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think like back. I don't exactly remember what I was thinking then, but I could have said then, oh, the market was changing on us, or people don't understand the value. And it's like you're blaming, the price protection mark, like the customer didn't understand the value we're creating, or like those are the reasons I would give you then. If you ask me today, what were the reasons is we did pivot fast enough like when the market was changing. So it's not the market changing was the reason we shut down, is we didn't pivot fast enough and realize that we weren't aggressive enough realizing the market was changing and made a quick enough shift or pivot. I could tell you that generally speaking, we weren't fast enough. I think like I thought at the time, oh, we were super fast, we were moving quickly, like things like that as a company, as a business, as a team. And like after you go and see other companies, other organizations, like high performing teams, you're like, holy shit, what I thought was fast was not fast. And like I think like speed and execution was not where it needed to be. I think those are like some of the things. I probably can think of another one or two that, you know, is different from what I thought that back
What do
then.
you think it brought, like, why, when you had that board discussion, were you so unprepared for that discussion? Like, in other words, like, why did you're coming to this board meeting and they're like, we're
Yeah.
going to talk about shutdown. And you're coming in talking like, let's talk about how we're going to grow for the next 12 to 18 months. And here's our plan. Huge divergence.
Yeah.
Why did that occur?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, by the way. The reason it occurred is because founders and entrepreneurs are trained in the mindset to like never give up. Like that's the mindset you have to be. You're gonna be like punched every single day. and you're going to be like thrown down and punched and knocked down and like by a team member leaving, by a partnership that falls through, by, you know, a new rule that comes out that's GDPR compliance or like it's endless, right? You're punched endlessly, endlessly, endlessly. And
Absolutely.
as a founder and entrepreneur, you are like, you can't give up. It's just not an option. Like I'll always give this example. Like when we eventually had the three of us as founders a discussion, like, oh shit, should we like maybe consider shutting down kind of thing when it kind of dawned on us from the board, like the S word, shut down, like like we called it the S word, right? Like no one wanted to even say it. Like we were embarrassed. Like who's going to say it first? Would Oded, my co-founder, say it, or Elon, or who's going to be the one that's going to throw out that like verb or that, you know, that word out there. So that's why I think like as a founder, you don't think about it, you don't bring it up, you're not in that mindset.
It's basically because you're so all in that you're unwilling to think about like failure is not an option, so it's not even
Yes.
on your radar.
Yes, and I think that's healthy and okay. I think there's a delicate balance between understanding your business and your financials, right? Because there's a decision of like, by the way, you can decide to give up or shut down even when you have $1 million in the bank. It is totally okay. It is like it is the responsible thing. But the decision to shut down, like what I'm trying to say is like that is a decision in itself and unrelated as a founder. I'm not discrediting that you need to understand your financials and the health of business and you can't be like in negative where you can't make payroll next week. So like don't get me where like I'm recommending that as founders, we should drive the company to the ground and like get to negative and go into bankruptcy and owe money to employees and things like that. But I am saying like from a philosophical perspective, we are trained and should be trained to like never give up at all costs. Yes.
And there's also a lot of stories of founders who don't give up and they pull a rabbit out of a hat at the last minute. I mean, a company I know
Slack,
pretty
the
well.
Slack story, they pivoted from being a gaming company to being Slack to like there's endless stories, right? So, but that's the light at the end of the tunnel that holds you as a founder and entrepreneur. Like, well, they pulled the hat like a rabbit out of the hat. You don't want to give up that sense of hope, and it's almost like also like you're so invested and you put so many years into it, and like you're like, why give up now? I'm ready 5 years in. Like, why? Like, it's better to keep going than restarting now, right?
Are there certain rules or heuristics you have in mind to decide when it is time to actually like throw in the towel? So, in other words, there's a healthy thing to say like, yes, you should never give up. On the other hand, there might be a point for a founder where there's enough data where it's like, hey, like this is just never going to be big, and life is too short. I can go spend a lot of time in other areas and do other things, or build a new company fresh. Like,
Yeah.
how long should somebody keep going, or when do they decide like, hey, this isn't it?
Yeah. So look, I think it really matters, like if we're talking about venture backed or non-venture backed, because you could be a founder and entrepreneur of a non-venture backed business and like you're only growing only 30%, 50% year over year, and that's totally fine. Like that's not a bad place to be. And but then there's some companies that are venture backed, have raised extreme capital, extreme valuations, and growing 30% year over year is like no one cares and the venture like ecosystem writes that off. So I think that like that's a factor that matters a lot in terms of like what the outcome you're looking for. But I generally think that the number one driver of a business and a company, especially like early stage, I'm talking about like pre-seed, seed, series A, even almost series B in that range, it is like the motivation and belief of the founders and the team. Like if that's not there, if your heart's not there, if you're not like, if you don't truly believe, by the way, you can be like, everyone could say you're fucking crazy, like, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to be like the same person. You could be but you believe you're so convinced that what you're doing is the right thing, that you're building the right, like, I think that's when you lose that, that is when I think you need to take a step back and say, like, am I spending like, if you start to doubt, am I using my right time? Is this like, am I making good use of my time? Am I like, when you start doubting, that's where I think you need to take a step back and think. And then obviously when you're forced to, from a financial perspective, like for running out of money, you have to like stop for a second. By the way, you can fire everyone and keep yourself the only employee and somehow run the business and regrow it. So it's not saying that that means it's the end. If you're out of money, you can like like reverse engineer and bootstrap it. But I think the biggest like thing to me is your motivation, your excitement, your passion for the what you're working on. If your heart's not there, I don't think it matters anything else. And if your heart's there, then like you can plow through anything.
Yeah, you can just keep going and you'll get it done. Do entrepreneurs who are venture backed, do they owe their VCs or their investors anything? Like, is there like, do they shut it down earlier because you want to give money back to VCs, or do you owe to the VCs? Say, I'm going to push it till the very end, and just as long as my heart's in it, like keep
Yeah.
going. What do people owe their venture capitalists, their funders?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a constant like tug of war between VCs and founders. And I think the thing is like I don't think you could say everyone is the same across the board. You have VCs that are very pushy to like, okay, this is not growing at the rate we expected. I don't believe in the pivot you did. I just give me my money back and like let me write it off. I don't want to spend my time here. And then you have other VCs that are like, listen, I invested in you. I will support you wherever you decide. Like I'm here to, I'm not pushy in any way. Like, I invested in you and what you were doing. So I don't think there's a certain like type or one thing that is like that we see consistently. We see different types across the board. I think that in the end, it is a very much a relationship business, and it's like your relationship with your VC comes down to you if you care about it or not. Like we see a lot of founders that end up like shutting down their company and raising from that investor like the next day in their next company. By the way, as an investor, it's actually like your odds are actually in your favor when you invest in a repeat founder because the chance that they will hit it on the second or third or fourth increases. So it's actually like a good investment. And so I don't think that I typically see investors favor founders more or less based on the capital they return to them. So it's not like, oh, you return, 10 cents on the dollar. So I appreciate you more than someone that returned 0 cents on the dollar. I think it comes down to what we see when founders on SimpleClosure, at least, like they shut down properly, they communicate. There's no surprises on the investor side. Investor, like if you're emailing your investor, hey, we're shutting down next week, and they say like, and they're surprised, then there's a problem there, right? And so I think that what we end up seeing, whether you're returning 0 cents or 10 cents or even 90 cents on the dollar, it's more how you do that process, making sure it's done the right way, making sure it's above board, making sure you do right by all your stakeholders. I think that matters and influences a lot more the future chance that that investor will invest again.
I totally agree. And that's what I saw with my first company when I shut it down. We returned about 10 cents on the dollar. We did the right way. We did it before the end of the year, like closed it all up. I think everyone was appreciative. And it led to all the other things that I feel like I've been really privileged to do in Silicon Valley in the past, 16 years since since I moved here. It didn't start my company right away, but since I moved here. The other like another question about this is like, when does a founder think through if you get to a point where like, hey, my heart's still not in it, or we're not doing great, or the way direction it should be going, you probably think through a variety of options: shut down the company, sell the company, acquihire, hand it off to other people to run it, a bunch of different options. How do you think through what option to choose and what direction to go? Like, do you have any advice for people? Like, obviously, your business does better when people come and close business up, for
Yeah.
simple closure, but that might not be the right advice for most
Yeah.
ever to actually shut it down fully.
Yeah, great question. First of all, about a third of the customers on our platform that are coming to us to shut down their business are post asset sale. So what a lot of people don't actually realize is when you do it. So there's two types of sales in general in the tech ecosystem: stock sale, asset sale. Stock sale, usually it's like Meta's buying this company for $400 million. They're buying the entire company in the cap table in the stock. What usually happens in tech and smaller acquisitions is like a $5 million acquisition, a 10 million, even a 20, 30. A lot of times it's done as an asset sale where they're buying certain assets of the business. So they're buying the team, or they're buying the team in the tech, or they're buying the customers in the team, whatever's variation of that. And then actually the founders that sold the business, the original founders, they are still on the hook with the shell entity. And that shell
Mm.
entity still needs to get dissolved and shut down. So I would say about a third of the companies on our platform come to us after they've done an acquisition. So it's something that a lot of founders actually don't realize is like, you think, oh, I sold the company, I don't need to shut it down. You still need to shut it. Like if you did an asset sale, which is most acquisitions, you still need to shut it down and take care of it properly.
Kind of time consuming, right? So if you're like, okay, I just sold it, I'm excited, great, I got some sort of exit. I maybe have a new job at some new company, and you're still like running the side thing where it's the shell of your company you poured your blood, sweat, and tears into, and you need to spend time shutting it down.
Yes. And that's exactly why Simple Closure exists, right? Our goal is to give you time back and peace of mind. So you don't have to spend the next few months of your life dealing with winding up. But to your point, yes, even after an asset sale, there's things that you have to deal with in order to be able to fully move on.
So yeah, what do you recommend? Going back to the question, like, what do you recommend
Yeah.
for
I was,
founder to do? Like, what is the ideal What if you're just like a friend, I'm advising you on what option to take, what would you say?
So the truth is, and this is what we typically see and what we recommend is like all of the above, right? Like you want to try to sell the business. By the way, you put kind of acquihire and sell the business. I think like typically it falls in the same category. Like whether the acquisition is an acquihire or a stock sale or an asset sale, it's some variation of selling the company or the value of the company. And so I think that in general, like you should try all of the above, which means trying to market yourself or sell yourself, like have a plan B, which if it doesn't work out, you're shutting down. You're probably also doing a plan C, or I don't know, this might be your plan A, but it's also fundraising in parallel, right? Because you're trying to raise a bridge round, you're trying to keep the company going. So,
Yep.
like in general, I think what we see most founders and I think is the right approach is like you're trying to raise, if you, again, assuming you believe in the business, assuming you're still excited in the business, at least your heart's still there. You're trying to raise in parallel, you're trying to sell because that's another avenue. Then you find maybe a soft landing for your team and the tech and all of that. And then as a third option, like you're planning for the worst case scenario, which is like a shutdown. The reality is, again, depending on how much you've raised to date and how the markets are, fundraising might be viable, might not. When it comes to M&A, like the reality is very few percent of companies end up getting acquired. It's just very, very hard to find a buyer for the company at the right moment in time. And everything has to be like the stars have to align to get sold. So the reality is in like most, and even if you did find a buyer, most likely it's an asset sale. So in most cases, you're anyways planning for this shutdown scenario. So like in general, I would say like, plan for the worst, hope for the best, but you're probably parallel tracking fundraising, selling the business and shutting down.
Yeah, no, I agree. Generally, that was been my experience. One of the things lessons I learned in my very first company, which we shut down, and advice I've given to other founders is so we had opportunities to exit and to sell, not for a lot of money. It basically would have been an acquihire, right? And so we could have done an acquihire. And I still to this day actually regret not taking the acquihire. So we'd potentially get acquired by Okta. Actually, it's like a long, long time ago. I sat down with their CEO. That's how small they were. It was like under $2 a share, pre-split, all these other things. I don't know what they're at today, but it's a lot more. And as a team, we decided not to do it because, like, oh, like we don't really know what this company does. Would we really want to work there? Of all the places we might want to go. In what I realized in retrospect, and I don't know if you agree with this advice, but is what we should have done is said yes to that. Even if we're like, we don't really know if this company's great, we don't know anything about it. Just said yes solely to have the exit on my sort of background and to like, hey, we exited. It wasn't a great exit necessarily, but we had an exit. We got something more for the investors, maybe not a lot more. Truthfully, they probably would have made the same money as they made when they got their cash back. As an entrepreneur, it might have been better for me to have that exit, even still, and it might have worked out actually financially great too. But like that wasn't the goal initially. Would that be advice you'd also give your founders? Like, hey, if you have an opportunity to sell, like just take the exit. You don't have, even if they want you to go work there for 4 years to do an earnout, you can also quit the next day. You still have the
Yeah.
exit.
Yeah. So great question. Look, I think it's very situational. Generally speaking, I agree with you. If you're early in your career, if you're a young founder, if you're like, on your first rodeo, that having that exit is a very, very valuable stamp of approval for your career. It values you different. It gives you, by the way, going to like if you came from startup land and you've never been like larger companies or corporate, like it is not bad to be there to learn you know, what scale looks like, what growth looks like, what exceptional companies look like. So, like, I know it sounds scary as a founder. I want to say, like, I've been a founder my entire career. I had a stint of about a year and a half that I was at like Trip Actions, now called Navan, and like it doesn't fit my resume, right? Like my resume has been entrepreneurial the whole career except for this one half. I want to say like the amount of things I learned in that year and a half and opened my eyes, and it was like I joined a company with 3,000 employees, right? So you could say like it's like very corporate, very slow, but the amount of things that help me today in terms of like how I think, how I operate, how I build organizations, my network has grown tremendously. Like it is very valuable. So I know it's sometimes scary to say, oh, I can't like joining a big company is like the worst thing in the world. But I think it's very, again, depends where you're on a career. If you've been your entire life at Microsoft and like you could get a like maybe there's not that much value, but I generally agree with you that as an early stage entrepreneur in your career, there's a lot of value. You'll by the way be judged differently when you go to start your next company and raise a round. It's very different to come to a VC and raise a round, and you'll probably be thrown like money will be thrown at you where it's like, oh, I exit my company. No one asks for how much did you exit, and like no one cares about that. Like it's all about the journey. It's all around the process. So saying that, hey, and especially like brand name like Okta, like that matters. Like
No
that's
one knew it.
big.
No one knew at the time, but like, this is exactly it though. This is my biggest, probably one of my biggest. I don't really have regrets. I don't believe in that, but like generally speaking, regret in where things went and everything's worked out fine. But I should have done that. It was crazy. I didn't. I was CEO. Didn't push. The team wasn't super excited. And I was like, all right, we'll figure it out. And we, it worked out okay. But so just really briefly, like what ended up happening with Earny? Like you had an exit, but it doesn't sound like it was anywhere close to what you all expected
Yeah.
or wanted.
Yeah. So, anyways, board meeting. Went to do my homework. Came back to the board a few weeks later after endless nights and days of researching shutdowns and all that. Presented to the board a shutdown plan. Board signed off, and they were like ready to kind of move toward a shutdown. We'd already done like riffs, and it was pretty painful. And interesting enough, we ended up raising a small bridge to keep us going a bit longer. And
From
then
your board, from the VCs in your board.
it was mostly externals. They kind of like chipped in a bit to like pro rata just show like participate, but it was like it wasn't led by our internals. It was led by by externals. So we raised a small bridge, and then we end up launching a data product. So we ended up like growing to 3.5 million users, and we had a lot of insights on consumer spend and how things were going. And so we ended up launching a product, and that product actually we launched it like 2 months before COVID. Then COVID hit, and so it exponentially increased the value of what we built because suddenly we had access to all this consumer insights on how people are spending on what during COVID when everything shifted to online. And so there was even more value in that in those insights. And so we ended up signing like we had the fastest hockey stick growth curve in terms of revenue in the history. Like company in general, we ran it for like 6+ years, but that like 6 to 9 months was like the fastest growing revenue hockey stick. We ended up signing a ton of partners or customers. And then actually we got acquisition offers from two different customers at the same time, give or take. And we ended up going with one of them. But like that was the journey from like, low of the low. It wasn't, the high of the high that, where we expected or where we wanted to land. But it was definitely like a better outcome than originally.
I mean, that's amazing. Sort of just you got to stick around long enough to get lucky is some famous quote, right? You got to just be there to get lucky, and sounds like you did, which is amazing. Speaking of some of the lessons learned, right? So you briefly mentioned early on that sort of speed is one of the key things that you've seen really successful founders do. Talk through like the lessons you've learned from Earny that you've applied at SimpleClosure or and also at Navan. Like, what are some of the lessons you've learned to how to build a great company? The second, essentially for you the third time around.
Yeah.
What are you applying? What are those lessons learned?
Good question. There's a lot of them, and sometimes I just like try to enforce them in my day to day, so I don't stop sometimes to think about what those are. I think there's like two or three main ones that come to mind right now. One is like move fucking fast,
Yep.
and when I say fast, like you have no idea what fast means. Like that's what I'm saying. Like speed is the superpower of a startup, and like if something's not working, like fix it now. And not like we'll get to it next. No, like stop it. Like move fast. That's one thing. I
Before
think
we go on to the next thing, how do you enforce that? How do you create that mindset and culture value? Because you said like you had that mindset, you thought you were moving fast at Earny. Lots of other companies and founders think they move fast, but they probably really aren't. So like, how do you enforce that or create that mindset?
one, I think I look for people that we are aligned on values and like and things. So one, I try to find people that have that same mentality or similar or what we think is the same mentality coming into the company to begin with. But in terms of enforcing it, it's about like very results driven culture, very execution focused culture, very much about like driving urgency in everything we do. It's like I like, like when we have a meeting as a company or as a team or every day is almost like do or die for us, even though that's not like the case. But I want people to live in like in a culture mentality that like the speed at which we move matters. And so that could be enforced with like projects or deadlines or things like that in order to like help build and foster that culture and speed. And I'll say it. If I feel someone's not moving fast, I'll literally slack and move faster. Like I'll be as direct as possible. Like move faster.
That's great.
It's not always like nice to hear, and it's always like, obviously people work really hard at SimpleClosure, and I appreciate like all the work that the team's doing. But I also think that like if we lose the speed, we lose our superpower. Someone else will come and we'll move faster and we'll be better and we'll execute better. It comes down to execution in the end, and speed is a huge part of execution.
It's a huge part. I think people spend too much time overthinking things in some cases and not actually executing. And I'm just like, just go get a version out. I just said this to someone on my team recently. It's like, just get a version out the door and we'll keep iterating. Like, don't shoot for perfection. And it's actually funny. I'm smiling a little bit when you're talking about this, like bias towards action stuff. We actually just changed our cultural values at the beginning of the year at Chore. One of them, we have three different ones. We updated the third one and it's now action. And it's essentially, we didn't want to say sense of urgency because our leadership team thought that was a little too negative. But it's essentially the idea of basically being just action oriented in everything we do because speed is so critical. But I still find enforcing that to be difficult sometimes as a company. Like, how do we really create that culture? So it sounds like you figured that out a bit, at least.
I wouldn't say I figure like there's still a lot to figure out and always like want to get better, but it's something that yeah, we care about. I try to hold myself first and foremost and the team accountable to like execution and speed. Yes.
Does that mean when you hold yourself accountable? I mean, like, is there a work-life balance in your life or work-life unity? Or is it just like, hey, like I'm always on, I'm responding to messages and emails and Slacks 24/7? Or like, what does it look like? Or how does it embody?
There is, unfortunately, there isn't a work-life balance in my life, which like that's not entirely true. Like I'm on all the time. And I think work-life balance is important because when I go for a run, when I go to like actually think better, like it's actually very, very helpful. And so sometimes, not sometimes, I think it's important to disconnect, but like, am I always on? Yes, for the most part. I will say, like, I have 4 kids at home, little ones. So it is, like, invested in work, but also, like, I have 4 kids and a wife and they need my attention too, and so, obviously, that's a bit of a force function of, like, me being able to me taking a break and spending time with the kids and being with them, which is good. It's healthy. I love it, and don't get me wrong, but, yeah.
How do you find time to do both of those? Like be a great husband, father, and CEO running this company moving quickly? Because like that work life unity is pretty tough. Coming from myself, by the way, in a similar boat, right? I don't have 4 kids, I have 2, but similar idea. Finding time for all that, let alone your health and doing a run every once in a while, is a challenge.
The honest truth is my family gets a lot of times the shorter side of the stick, like, and it sucks. And so, like, it is a sacrifice that they all make for like believing in the company and what we're doing. But like, I wish I had more time, like, for my wife and my kids, which they're all amazing. And like, the reality is they do get the shorter end of the stick. But I think it comes down to like ruthlessly prioritizing, like ruthlessly constantly. Like, when I say prioritization, it's not only prioritizing what I'm doing on the work side, but it's also what I'm doing on the personal side. The amount of opportunities I have, for example, for travel, for work, like there's, meetings, New York, events, conferences, like things like that. Like, I cherry pick like what I go to because the cost of not being home for 3 days now and my wife with 4 kids alone, like that is a very, very high toll on the family. And so I like it requires me to really prioritize and like hand cherry pick what things I go to and what I don't. And so is it better for the business that I go to all the events? Yes, it is better, but like, is it better for my family? No, it's not better. So
Right. And if it's not better, and if your family starts to fall apart in different ways, that then starts to hurt you, and that also
of
hurts.
course,
So
yeah.
it's all a trade off.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's right. I tell my wife that all the time.
Yes.
So going back to your lessons learned, right? So okay, speed is critical. Is that your kind of number one thing? What are some of the other key things you try to?
I think there's 2 other things that come to mind other than speed. The second one is make money and generate revenue as fast as possible and as aggressive as possible. Like, I think that revenue, and look, every company's a bit different. Maybe their metric is not revenue, it's, certain like engagement or or potential I don't know, ACV and like things like that. But I really think that prioritizing revenue and understanding that in the end, we're building businesses. Like, there's a lot of wrappers around it, and it's tech and it's venture back and startup and all. And then you're building a business, you're just scaling it very, very quickly. But at its core, the business has to work. And for a business to work, it has to make money. And so, like, at our core, like, I think, like, like, I was not, that's a lesson I learned, that it wasn't as top of mind, wasn't aggressive. We're growing in users, we're growing in this, it's all like looking good and things like that. But like, ultimately, like, but do the economics make sense? What's the CAC? What's the LTV? What's the revenue? What's like, I would say that is probably the second thing that comes to mind. And then the third thing I would say is more on a personal note is like focus on what matters. There's a lot of noise, a lot of noise in the company, in the business. And as a founder, you can get drawn in 100 different directions. It's like focus on the things that move the needle. If it doesn't move the needle, it doesn't matter.
So how do founders get good at that? So this is actually a pet peeve of mine, by the way. So one of the things I talk about a ton in the focus of my company, Chore, is we take on the back office operations, right? HR, finance, compliance, equity, all the things that matter because your business needs to do it, but it's not something you should, as a founder, should spend any mental time thinking about ever. How do founders get good at deciding what isn't doesn't matter or what doesn't move the needle? Because it can feel in the moment like everything is important and you need to deal with it.
So two things come to mind. First, you have to burn your hand in hot water to learn. She's just saying like burn your hand in hot water in order to be cautious with lukewarm waters.
Mm.
There's a famous saying in Hebrew. I could sit and pitch what you should do, but like part of me realizing this is because I did it and I spent time and I learned that that wasn't like what moved the needle. So one is honestly like experiencing it and realizing that it doesn't move the needle or create a asymmetrical outcome. And the other thing is, I think you just have to ask yourself, like, if I do this, will this change the trajectory of the company? And if the answer is no, then it's like, why am I spending my time on this? And I'll give you an example. Like previously at Earny, and no way, I'm not saying it's not important. I was the one that was like handling more of the finance and the QuickBooks and the HR and the Trinet and Rippling and all that shit.
So if you should have handed to Chore if we existed when Ernie was around.
Yes. And 100%. And by the way, I first of all, I love that type of work. Like it's my natural. I'm very like operational and efficiency focused. I love that. But like I thought it was the most important thing in the world that I was doing at that moment in time as the founder of the company. But ultimately, like the company didn't land where we wanted to land and it wasn't the outcome. And I asked myself, the fact that I was really good at that or did it really well or like did that change the outcome of the company? And the answer is no. Like I could have been like the worst at like QuickBooks and categorizing stuff and like choosing the right payroll provider and like the company outcome wouldn't have changed. If I would have done these partnerships or generated this revenue or built this product line, could that have materially changed the outcome of the company? The answer is yes. And so you have to be constantly good at as a founder and entrepreneur is like, is what I'm working on really gonna like move the needle? And if not, then it's noise. And yeah, so I think it's a
Couldn't agree more. And then on that note, I mean, how do you think founders build like essentially a team that can make better decisions for you? Like, how do you find teammates who can start making decisions on your behalf so you don't have to be in every decision and be the person doing HR and doing how do you build that knowledge or delegate different things away to keep a company growing and give you space to focus on the things only you can do?
yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. It's mainly like hiring the right people. Like and now what is the right people you can define like but I think it's just about like building the infrastructure and hiring the right people and it changes. Like when you're an early stage company, you don't need a leadership team. You just need more ICs that can execute. As you grow, you start to think about like the leadership team. But in general, I think the philosophy here is like as a manager or leader, you should hire people that are better than you at any one of these roles that you're currently doing. And like obviously they have to be the right culture and the right fit and all that. But in general, I think it's like, you know, they should be more experienced and better than if you're hiring someone that's better than you at go to market, at operations, at sales, then like it's probably not the right hire because you're not going to disconnect and you're not going to give them the freedom to work and operate. You want people that are more experienced with you, more tenor than you in the discipline that they're in. And I think that's probably the best advice I have there.
Yeah, no, totally fair. Are there things like founders should be thinking about when it comes to building a great company and staying alive? Anything else, like any other advice? And then we're going to go quickly, keep you on time. Like just at a high level, like things to do, like build a great company, be a great entrepreneur, learn faster, move faster. Are there personal things you try to do, or is it just work harder?
I don't think it's work harder. I don't think working harder is the answer. Like putting more hours doesn't mean you'll be. It's about it's like working smarter. I think the like other than what we discussed, prioritization is
Mm.
so key. Prioritization, like it is like you should be prioritizing every month, week, day, hour, even within an hour, even within a 30-minute block that I suddenly have free in my day. Like you are challenged to be able to prioritize to make sure that you're working on the things that are impactful, that you're unblocking people on your team, that you're like, so I think like prioritization is key.
How do founders or great founders, at least maybe all founders, separate self-worth from performance? And especially like a company shutting down, it's also like an emotional, like there's sort of, you need to separate your own personal self-worth from performance maybe. And especially when it fails, is there an emotional component to separating yourself from like your identity being your, I'm CEO of this company and that's my identity. How do you separate those two?
The truth is, like, it's very rarely separated. Like, almost every founder I talk to, when they come to SimpleClosure, like, they see the failure of the company as their personal failure, because they tie their self-worth to the company, and it's understand like, you've been the mascot of this company, you've been the brand, you've been the face, you've been the CEO, you've been the founder for the last 5 years, you've put your social reputation, you put your financial reputation on the line, you've put, like, everything on this, and so, like, it just naturally happens. I don't know if you can disconnect your self-worth, whether it's okay or not okay. Look, you're invested. This is your baby. This is like you put your blood, sweat, and tears. You've worked 100,000 hours over the last whatever years to like build this thing. So it's very natural that it happens. It happens a lot. I think the advice that if I talk to a founder that I always share and give is like this company that's like shutting down. I don't know. We've worked on it 2 years, 3 years, probably on average 3 to 4 years is the average we see. Maybe 5 years, 6 years. This is just like a data point in your broader like career and your story.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And so like failure is part of success, and just like we said, it takes multiple failures in order to succeed in most cases. And so like this is just a blip on your journey, and it's part of a bigger story and a bigger journey, and like you need to fail here in order to be better and go and start your next business and succeed. So I'm just saying that like I think that the best way to like is probably to think about it in a way where if you just like, don't get me wrong, it's a failure, and it sucks, and you feel bad and you're tied to that failure, but the company is like its time in life ended, but you're just 10% into your career. You still have like, 90%. And so this is part of your career and journey, and it's like, and you'll learn a lot more from this than anything else. And so I think that that's, kind of how I look at it, at least.
I mean, I think you kind of answered the next question a bit already, but like, are there things like it's something you wish that more first time founders understood before they started their company? Is it just like this is part of your journey, or is there something else to understand before you start that entrepreneurial path down that entrepreneurial path?
Look, I think there's so much to like it's a loaded question. There's so much to understand. I actually think starting your first company is like you going to college.
Yeah.
That's the truth. There's so much you learn from your first company. You have no idea like what a term sheet means. You're like, oh, they have liquid pref stacks. Like what the fuck is this? It's like gibberish, right? Like it's going to calculus or something, right? Like you don't even know what this means. That's a small example. Payroll, rules, regulations, product market fit, like everything is like, so to say that like there's certain things, like the best advice is just like embrace yourself and everything, ask a ton of questions, fail fast. The more you learn, the faster you'll be like set up for your next success. I also think another thing is like it's very hard if like again, I think war scars is like the only way to so I could say sit here and preach and say, "Oh, you should do this," but I think like if you don't go through it, like you don't know what it actually means, but like I think that after going through like a business or two even, you kind of like things that seemed, "Oh my god, this is happening. This employee sued us." Like it's like, "Okay, the employee sued. It's part of business. Like that's what happens. It's normal. That's like the cost of running a business, or this partnership like canceled on us. Like so like things. I think the thing is like that in your first startup, they seem so detrimental. So and don't get me wrong, they're detrimental. They're life changing. They're stressful, but like in retrospect, again, like anyone that's been punched in the face 100 times, when you punch them the 100th month, it's like it doesn't hurt that much. Like I'm used to it. It's okay. Like yeah. So like I would say it has a bit of negative because I think like I like highs are not highs for me and lows are not lows. It's just like cruising, like building and doing like that. So like even when we have a high and like we fundraise or we launch a new like I I I I like it toned me down a bit because like I learned not to get too excited from the highs and also not to be too disappointed from the lows. It's like part of the journey. You're climbing a mountain. There's peaks and valleys and peaks and valleys and yeah.
Congratulations on that fundraise. I think about 8 months ago, $15 million. But like like that was 8 months ago. So now you're probably like, all right, we're on to the next. Like, what's the next big milestone we need to hit to go hit the metrics that our Series A investors expect?
Yeah, and look, I think fundraising to me, it's a huge testament for the team. And it's like for the value, the team, the market, like it really is a good way to signify to the team that like we're doing something right. Their hard work is paying off. And like so I really think it's important. But like to tell you that I went out and partied after we did like no sending out and like working until midnight, like the next like nothing happened, right? So
You probably have a lot of friends who are other founders and maybe investments that you've made. Are there certain patterns or characteristics that make you confident a founder will endure and like even if they stumble, they will endure or succeed at some point? Are there characteristics?
people that I know really well, I think I can say, oh, I think they like because I know them, I know their personality, I know their strengths and their weaknesses. I can say, oh, they'll do well as a founder, or they won't do well. When you introduce me to a new founder or entrepreneur, like I don't know them well enough to think if they can do well or not do well as a founder. But it's just like when you hire someone for your team, you have intuition. You're like, oh, I think this person is like the right material, the right culture. So obviously, I have my intuition. I don't have a way to measure that intuition other than intuition. I will say that whenever like someone I talked to is like, "Hey, I'm thinking of starting a company or I want, net new first time founder." I'm like, my first question is, do you like suffering? Do you literally like you're going to suffer. Like there's some people that love suffering and love pain. And like they're the people that, do like these crazy Ironmans and things like that, that they're like, why would you do that to yourself? Like that is being a founder. Like you're gonna endure pain and suffering. And so the first question when someone's like, oh, I think you're starting a company, I'm like, do you like suffering? If they smile and say, yes, I love it, then I'm like, great. If they're like, why? Or they get scared from that question, it's like, maybe you're not
Yep.
ready to be an entrepreneur or founder necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's so great. And people should ask themselves that question because I think there's a whole mindset of like, oh, it seems sexy to be a founder and get investment and stuff, but it's actually not all that sexy. It's a lot of work. And being the CEO of your own company where it's failing is not something that and keeping you up all night long is not something that's the most exciting in the world. Um,
Mhm.
so I finish off every episode with one question, which is if there's a single piece of advice that you could boil down, so not easy to do, but boil down that you would give to every entrepreneur to be excellent, what is that single piece of advice that you would give them?
I think prioritization, ruthlessly prioritize. I think that ultimately makes sure that you're spending your time in the right direction. That's
Yeah.
what I would say.
Well, on that note, thank you for being here with us and spending some of your really precious time with my audience. I appreciate it. Dori, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about SimpleClosure if they're going through a shutdown? Where can they find you?
Yeah. One, I'm on X and on LinkedIn, just Dori Yona. You can find me there. You can go to our website, simpleclosure.com. My email is also Dori@simpleclosure.com. It's pretty straightforward. And again, we're happy to, like, our goal is to help founders and entrepreneurs at this very difficult time in their life. We've built a platform to streamline and automate the process of shutting down. We do it in days and weeks versus months and years. We do it for a fraction of the cost. And so they can reach out and we're happy to help, whether you're actively shutting down or you're trying to sell the company and you might need to shut down after you sell, or you're like, hey, I'm out of money in 6 to 9 months. I just want to know my options and how this works. We are always available. We're always there to talk to founders and entrepreneurs and help them through this process. Our goal is to make this as simple as possible and be there to support founders and help them get back on the saddle for their next company. That's ultimately like what drives us.
Yeah, and everyone should do that if they have a chance. Go try it again. You're going to learn so much in the first time. Get back out there. Dori, once again, thank you. Really appreciate your time. Go spend it. Go spend the rest of it with your family, your team, everything else, and let's go build some amazing companies. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.